Hey there, how's it going? Welcome to my channel and welcome to this video. In this video, I planned to give a complete demonstration from scratch of how to build a Power BI dashboard. The reason for this is in my professional career, I've used Power BI quite a bit. I'm not an expert by any means, but I've used it a good bit. And I've been asked by people, how do I use Power BI, or how do I build a dashboard, or how do I get better at this? And I've been asked that a lot, and I've helped a lot of people with it. And I thought that making a video could help even more people get into Power BI and learn how to build dashboards. Now, the reason that I said this is from scratch is probably the most important thing with building a Power BI dashboard, I would say, and what I've told people time and time again, is what really matters is understanding your data, understanding what you want to do with it, understanding how you want to set it up, and then just plugging away at it kind of and seeing where it takes you. So I wanted to model this video kind of after my thought process in the same way. So what I did not want this video to be was a how-to video on how to import data, or a how-to video on how to build a bar chart, or how to make a line graph. We'll probably do all of those things and many more in this video. But the main thing that I want to display is, how do you even think of when to do a bar chart? Or how do you think about where do we want to import the data from, or how do we want to structure it? It'd be one thing to say, this is how you often do it, and this is how you do that. It's another thing to say, well, let's look at it and figure it out. With that said, I've done a little planning and figured out a data set that we're going to use. And I'll tell you why I picked that data set, and how that's going to be helpful for learning some of these lessons. As we, even with that little bit of pre-planning, as we go, you'll see that I haven't, for instance, built this dashboard already before making the video, and now I'm just recreating it to show it. I'm going to be building this for the first time. I'm really, except for just a brief exploration, looking at this data for the first time. And my hope is that I won't do everything perfectly or even very good. And there will be times that maybe I have to backtrack or pivot to something that is a complete or at least a somewhat different direction from where I originally thought this was going to go. And the reason for that is because that's how it works in real life. Very rare will you have a requirement, like a business requirement, and you'll know from the get-go where your data is, how you want to structure it, how you want to import it, and how you want to display it. It's much more likely that even if the requirements stays the same, which that might not, but even if that were to stay the same, just your own thought process and report building is going to lead you in a lot of different directions. So I wanted to show some of that here. So anyway, that's enough talking about building Power BI dashboards. Let's just get started and see where this goes. So as I mentioned, I have a data set in mind that I think will be useful for this project. I surfed through Kaggle.com, and it's, among other things, a really handy website for finding data sets on almost any topic you can imagine. A lot of this data is data that has been scraped from the web, or has been, there's even APIs set up to pull some of this data. People have done it for you and put it here in CSVs, or have hand found the data, or even sample data. It's all sorts of different things for different purposes. It could be for an actual project you want to use to actually get an output that can be useful, or it could be a project that you want to use to learn data analysis or data science or machine learning or whatever it is. Or it could be a data set that's even meant to just be trained for machine learning. So there's all sorts of stuff here. I would check it out and see what interests you and what you want to start building with. But I'm a big sports fan, and so what I stumbled upon initially actually was not this data set, was a data set that had more aggregate level statistics. And this is going to get into our first talking point here. It had season by season data. So it would be, for instance, Arsenal had, actually it was week by week data, not season by season. And it would be Arsenal week 1 had 1 win, 0 losses. And Liverpool had 0 wins and 1 loss, and so on. And then week 2 was, this team was 1-1, this team was 2-0, this team was 0-2, and some other stats as well. And so on, you had a weekly feed of that. And what I thought was, well, I think it'd be interesting to get data one level deeper, to get match by match data. And what getting a lower level of data like that will allow you to do is then aggregate it yourself to be more flexible with how you want to direct your insights, for instance. So you're not limited by how they aggregated it. You get to do the aggregation. That said, you need to limit that at some point to what makes the most sense for your business purpose. What do I mean by that? Well, you could go further. I said I want match by match data. You could go minute by minute. You could have data. I mean, it sounds large. It really wouldn't be that large in terms of how big data sets can get sometimes. You can get minute by minute data of every game for who knows when, since 1993 if you want, or 1965 or whatever, or 2002. And you could have every game and every minute, minute 1, minute 2, minute 3, minute 4, when goals were scored. And you could do some analysis on, for instance, if goals are scored more often in the last 15 minutes of the first half compared to the last 15 minutes of the second half, or in overtime, or whatever it is. You can do a lot of analysis. However, I don't really want to do that. That just doesn't seem like a good step for this project. So for me, that didn't make any sense to try to find that data. So where I settled on was match by match data. And that's the first point. Sometimes what's available to you is very high level aggregate data, and you can use that. And sometimes you want to get a deeper level of detail. What makes the most sense? It depends on your business purpose. It could be the low level, it could be the high level, it could be what's available. So these are all decisions you have to weigh when deciding how to first even bring in your data set. So that said, let's get into it. I'm going to download this Premier League.csv, and by clicking the download button, I'll see, got to sign in. So first snag here. I believe I have an account with Google. Premier League download. Cool. All right, so let's take a look. The first thing we're going to do is just get a load of this data. Take a look at it. Like I said, I explored briefly on Kaggle, like on the website itself, to see what kind of columns were in here and get a basic idea of what I wanted to do. But I have not even looked at a spreadsheet or a CSV file of this yet. So I'm looking at this for the first time, just like you are. So let's see. The first thing I notice is we have data for match ID, season, match week, and so on up until column J here, full-time result. Then, now this is clearly, at least appears to be sorted earliest to newest. And starting at column K, there's a lot of blank columns here. What that tells me is this data, it was probably not available for earlier seasons. Not that it wasn't available ever, but maybe that the way that this was pulled, it's not currently available. And it will be populating for future seasons. At least I hope so, or at least this isn't going to work. And so as soon as I get to the 1995-96 season, we start seeing, freeze top row, be a little bit easier to see what's going on. So as we go down, we see we have this data, populating, halftime home team goals, halftime away team goals, and halftime results. So that just says how many goals did the home team score in the first half, and how many goals did the away team score in the first half, and who was winning at that point. Some of these columns we're not going to use. We don't need everything. And I don't think we're going to use this, to be honest. So, okay. So as we scroll down, we get more data. So starting in 2000, it looks like, we actually have a lot more data starting to become available. And depending on what we want to do, we might have to start our analysis in 2000, or at least have a disclaimer that some of this is not available prior to that. So we get a lot more data starting in the year 2000, in the year 2000, such as referee, home team shots, away team shots, home team shots on target, away team shots on target, and so on. It looks like a lot of this data starts there. What I do notice as well, though, is that these are still blank. So for 2000, it's this Bet365 data. I don't know exactly what that is, but I think it's probably a newer thing. I know sports betting, sports gambling in general tends to be newer. I don't think it was as prominent in the year 2000. Not that it wasn't done, it just probably wasn't as prominent. So a lot of these things might not be available until later seasons. But I'm not super interested in using that anyway, so that's okay. Yeah, so some of this starts up here, some of it goes back. And once we get here, it looks like we start having all this data. So 2019 and 2020. So we want to go further back than that. I think it'd be interesting to see a couple decades of data at least. So, and at least my initial thought is we bring this data into Power BI, and the output will be possibly standings pages. It'd be cool to see some aggregation of the wins and losses and scores, and see how the standings worked out. See if we can get it to what it actually was, or if we messed something up. And then a team by team page, maybe with a toggle that you can choose a team and see how they did over time. Were they better in the past? Are they better now? Has it kind of stayed steady? And see something like that. So that's my initial thought on what would be a good idea for this. So we don't really need the Bet365 and all that for that. So another thing to point out here is you'll notice this data is in the format of one record per game, meaning this row has a match ID right here, and that match ID corresponds to a single game. Now, this match ID actually is informative. A lot of times it might not be. A lot of times IDs might just be a counter, or it's like a system-generated value. But in this case, it says 1993 to 1994 Arsenal Coventry. So what do you know? That is from the that game is from the 1993 to 1994 season between Arsenal and Coventry. You see home team, away team, and you kind of see that structure throughout this CSV file. So you have home team shots on target, away team shots on target, home team corners, away team corners, home team fouls, away team fouls. That's probably good for a machine learning task to take home and away results and use that to help your predictions. However, it doesn't really help what we want to do. The reason it doesn't really help with what we want to do is because, like I said before, we're going to be trying to aggregate data on a team-by-team basis, showing standings, showing a team-specific page where you can see how they trended over time. And the thing is, if this is our fact table, and I'll show you later that you tend to have one fact table. You can have multiple. I've had multiple, but you should try to have one fact table if you can. And you have dimension tables branching off of it. That's not going to work too well with each record being responsible for two different teams' results. For instance, this row, just the first row, has home team of Arsenal and away team of Coventry. So say we have a dimension table for our team, so a table above the fact table, above, metaphorically, the fact table of teams, and they're related to this fact table. Well, now, you can't really do that. You can't, you can maybe finagle away. I'm not saying it's impossible to figure it out, but you're not going to be related from the dimension to the fact table on a specific column, because you're going to have just as many identifiers that you want in your home team column as your away team column. We want to aggregate data for Arsenal. We want to be able to aggregate it for Coventry, and we want to be able to do it on the fly when we need it. So this won't work. What I think will work is we are going to have to do some data cleanup. We are going to have to take all of this data that we want to actually use that's in the format of home team shots, away team shots, home team shots on target, away team shots on target, home score, away score, whatever, and take that kind of width out of it and make it and take that width and make it a length. And what in the world do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is, instead of having all these columns all the way across, home and away, home and away, home and away, I just want the column itself. I just want to know in the first row, instead of, forget halftime, but instead of home team shots, away team shots, I want team shots. And I want that first record to be team shots for Arsenal. I want the second record to be team shots for Coventry in the same game. Arsenal, row 1, Coventry, row 2. How it currently is Arsenal and Coventry are in the same row. So instead of one row per game, what we want is one row per team per game. So we're going to have to change some things up to do that. A good question you might ask is, well, we're also going to want to know what happened in each game. We don't want to just sum up what happened for Arsenal or just sum up what happened for Coventry. And you're right. Well, that's not a question, but that is something you might say. And the question part of that would be, well, how do we do that? How do we make sure we can still understand when a game happened and what happened in that game? Well, like I showed earlier, match ID is given here, and that's huge. If it wasn't, that's okay. We could just make our own ID. We can just start with 1 and go down. That would be fine as well. Or A, and, well, you would start with 1 and go down. That would be fine. It's here, though. I don't see really any reason not to use this. It doesn't have to be a number. It doesn't have to look like a serial number. It can be this, and so we'll just use this. They should be distinct. I don't see why these IDs would not be distinct. Except maybe I don't know enough about soccer or football. I don't quite understand what would happen if two teams play each other again. Maybe they only play each other twice. Once, one team's away and one team's home, and one vice versa. Meaning this is probably somewhere else, or there's probably another match ID, 1993, 1994, Coventry Arsenal, but not another one of 1993, 1994 Arsenal Coventry. And we can check that real quick. And this is important. What I'm doing right now is what you should do every time. You should explore your data and see what's actually going on in here. And that's going to really help you understand it and then be able to manipulate it down the road. So let's take a look here. My guess is, like I said, there's a 1993, 1994 Coventry Arsenal. I might just be able to scroll. Let's see. Yeah, right here. I'm curious. It's calling it match ID. I doubt they set this up where there's duplicate match IDs. That wouldn't make any sense unless there's some weird situation where two matches are separate but they're the same match for some reason. There's a hurricane in the middle of it and to go to a different day. It still might be a different match ID. I'm just saying if there is a duplicate, maybe there's something like that. There shouldn't be any duplicates just because of like Arsenal and Coventry playing twice in the same season. I wouldn't think, but we can check. So my thought is maybe we do something like a quick Excel formula. We could say if, what would we do? If this, let's do count if range this might work. Count if this is our range, and see if you see this. And you should only ever have one if I'm thinking about this right. So basically in this whole range, A to A, so this whole column, this cell, the value in this cell, appears one time, which is what we want. So if I drop this all the way down, and then I should not be able to filter to anything other than one. And if I can, either our assumption was wrong and we should just do our own ID, or maybe there are some edge cases where there would be a duplicate that we need to take a look at. So one thing I do with stuff like this, we don't really need to change that formula. We don't really need to use it in the formula form anymore. So I tend to copy and then just paste as values. It'll sometimes when you have too many formulas going on, especially if you have a lot of data, I don't quite know how much we have. It's not really a lot, but that either way, it can hurt your performance, hurt Excel's performance. So, all right, there's no 2s, so we're good. But that was a good check. All right. Another thing I notice, and I had thought about this already, but I notice it now, is match week has a 1. And so this is the game that all these teams played in week 1. Match week 2 is what all these teams played in week 2. Or all the games that were in week 2. Because teams don't always play on the same day. They probably often play on the same day. Or what I mean by that is many of them play on the same day, or at least similar days, and you can kind of see that here. But they don't all play on the same day for the same week. And that would make, if we want to do a line chart later on, like time series analysis or anything like that, challenging, because what's more important than the dates that you played, like it doesn't matter if you played on August 14th or August 16th, and it doesn't matter the difference between one week and the next in terms of days. What matters is the week. So we can see week by week, like how is the standings changing if we want to do something like that. If you do it by date, you might have an instance where you use like a time frame slicer, like a slider, and you're in between 2 weeks, or you're where like some teams have played their 7th game for that season, and some teams haven't played it yet, so they've only played 6 games. So now your standings are kind of like off because of that. So we're probably going to want to do that kind of analysis if we do that kind of analysis based off match week. But I'm going to keep date. Maybe we'll find some other use for it. I don't see a reason to not keep date. Just something to think about. Okay, so I think I'm good here. There are many different ways you can import data into Power BI. And I want to kind of sample a couple of different ways with this. So one thing you can do is you can import straight from the CSV file. There's nothing wrong with that. And I do that all the time. That's great. You can import from an Excel file, which is effectively the same thing. You can import from a Postgres database. You can import from a Power BI data flow that already exists. You can import from Oracle SQL. You can import from Microsoft SQL. SQL and SQL. Microsoft's products are SQL. The language itself is SQL. That's the difference. A lot of different ways you can import data, even other things. I want to show off importing from Postgres, but I don't want this to be like a Postgres tutorial or anything like that. I just want to show that you can do that. Importing data from Excel is very easy. It's just get data and then you import it. So I think it will suffice not to show that. But what I do want to do is to show importing from Postgres, which is only a couple more steps anyway. But I don't want to use SQL statements to do the data wrangling that we need to do. And the reason is, like I said, this is a Power BI course or Power BI video. and I want to focus on the options that Power BI has to offer. Because if you do pull in data from an Excel file, then you're not going to be able to do SQL statements to pull stuff in. So this will be no good for you if that's how you're doing it. So I'm going to use a Postgres database, or at least I'm just running Docker for an image, a Postgres image. And I'm going to use that just to show the steps to import it via just a Postgres connection. But I'm not going to do any SQL related steps to get the data in, because what we could do is we can have this data sitting in our database as is, no changes going in. And then we can do what we want to do with two different SQL statements, right? We can do it. If you don't know SQL, just bear with me for the next 2 minutes. If you do, then you'll understand what I'm saying. We could take the home team columns we want and alias them as whatever name we want without the home or away, and then we can do the same thing for the away. We can just do the same query twice, one for the home team columns and then whatever other columns we want, like match ID, and then one for the away, and then union them, and that gives us exactly what we want. And in practice, we are going to do that. I just don't want to do it with SQL statements. That's probably the easiest way to do it. I don't want to do it because I want to show something that will work just as well importing from Excel or CSV or anything else. I want to use Power BI's Power Query to do all of it. And I don't want to do any, the one Excel column I did to check the data, that was just me looking at the data. I don't want to do anything to this sheet. I don't want to take the columns out that we're going to take out. I don't want to do anything, because what I want to be able to happen is, say this is a sheet, say we don't have like a full pipe, so we're not able to set up a full pipeline. Say this is a sheet that we get weekly but via email, right, from some source. Well, I want this to be, you could store it as an Excel file, you could store it in a database, wherever you store it, to be something that you can just either overwrite if you get all the data every time, or just append or whatever, but something you don't have to do anything to every time. You just do whatever you got to do to bring it right into your source. So I'm going to do nothing to this file, and then we're going to do everything that we need to do, which is a solid chunk of things, in Power BI. So let's see, this should be saved in my downloads, right? It is, so I don't think I'm showing you anything confidential there. At least I hope not. All right, so let's see. Let's go to here, and the first thing we're going to do is create a table. So I haven't even created a table yet, and we're going to use my handy dandy friend Claude. I don't know if you know Claude, but he's pretty good at stuff like this, and I am going to just feed Claude off screen here. There's some prompts, okay. I'm going to feed Claude these column names, and I'm going to say, and they're all, except for date, they should all just be textual. Well, that's not true. There's numbers right here, and we want numbers. So I'm going to let it figure that out, and then we'll adjust if needed. And you know what? I might actually give a shot to importing the entire file and see how that works. So downloads. Well, let me put it in like this. Yeah. Even though I have it open. Yes. Here is I could bring this over. You can see that my name is Nick. Here is a CSV file that I would like to import into a PostgreSQL database. Please give me a create table statement with all of the column headers. Choose types based on the data you see in the file and or common sense, i.e. the date column is obviously a date. Now this is just something we could do, but it's easier just to get this create table statement like this. Let's see if that works with the CSV. I could just copy and paste the headers in if I need to. While this goes, I didn't realize that I was going to have a lot to say about this, but it's all important stuff that we need to think about. So this video could be a multi-part video. This is probably good. It didn't keep the same names in the sense that it gave underscores, which is and lowercase everything, which is just standard for Postgres, and I think most SQL databases. That's fine. It doesn't matter when we try to import the data. It won't matter. It's not gonna. We're just not even gonna. We're not gonna use the column headers for anything. It's just gonna be based on the location of the column with separated by commas, so comma separated values. So that's fine. I just want to make sure these types look right, and they look right. If we have a problem importing, then we'll fix it. This should be fine. It even is making this a primary key. We don't really need that, but that's cool. Minimize this. Let's go to Postgres here. I already have a query window open. I'm going to take this away. It's honestly fine. If it's null, we'll deal with it. I don't want to find one random row that has a null for some reason. That's the only reason I'm doing this. If we were importing from Excel, we wouldn't just have a not null feature, so we'll deal with that as it comes. It might be fine anyway. I don't know that any of those columns would have had nulls, so it probably would have been fine. Okay, so we have our table now. So if all went well, I should be able to just import. Let's do UTF-8. There is a header, so we're good there. You want to mark this. That's our columns. Okay, process completed. And here's our data. Okay. We're ready. 33 minutes into a video about Power BI to start using Power BI. On the outset, maybe that sounds absurd, but like I said, we took 30 minutes in the grand scheme of things, not a lot of time to explore the data, kind of figure out what we wanted. I'll give a little bit more than 30 minutes because I looked at the data a little bit, like I said before starting this video. So we'll even say an hour, even call it a day or a week or whatever. Any of that, depending on how much time you have and how big this project is, these thoughts we're having about how to structure the data. What does this look like? Where do we want to put it? How do we want to import it? Those are all very important, and those are going to help us so much down the line. Because in Power BI, what trips people up, I feel like a lot of times, is if they get to the point where they're writing DAX code, and if you don't know what that is, DAX code is Data Analysis Expressions, I believe is what it stands for. And it's essentially the code you use, the data analysis code, the Excel formulas on steroids that Power BI uses. And if your data is just, it's not formatted in a way that's conducive for using DAX, and it's not, and you don't understand it that well to begin with, then you're going to have to get really crazy with DAX to get the output you want. And what's going to happen as well is your expressions are going to work for very narrow purposes. You're going to make something for a singular purpose, and it's only ever going to work for that, because if you try to use it on something else, it breaks because your data is not set up in a way that works for that. Not saying you don't ever do that anyway. There's times you make a measure or a new column or whatever for one thing. I'm not saying you don't ever do that. You surely do that. But what I'm saying is your bread and butter measures and columns and calculated columns and whatever are things that you should be able to reuse over and over and over again. DAX also lets you use measures you've already created in other measures. So if you have those baseline ones and you know they work every time and you know exactly what they do, you can then use them for other ones. And it makes the back end of what you're doing, meaning the down the road steps, that much easier, that much simpler. And actually, you're not going to have to write all this crazy DAX code. You still might if you're doing something real out there. But honestly, like if your data's set up right, a lot of your stuff is going to be count rows and sums. A lot of it really is. A lot of our stuff really is. Thinking of some other stuff that we're going to do as well, but I mean, a lot of it's going to be summing goals and counting games or whatever. If our data wasn't set up right, if we didn't end up doing this home team and away team thing we're doing, we'd have to do a lot of other stuff. And I think we're still going to have to do conditionals to check for home and away for certain things. So don't get me wrong, there's going to be some more complexity to it, but we're going to be saving ourselves a lot of work and headaches down the road. All for, at this point, 37 minutes. So anyway, let's go to Power BI. So we're going to get data from more. And like I said before, you can see there's all these different ways to obtain data and bring it into Power BI. A lot of these I don't even know what they are. What I do know is this one. PostgreSQL database. Connect. This is going to be just dependent on whatever your setup is. I remember what I did here. Usually you'll get prompted for a username and password. I tested this out once and typed in my username and password, so that's why I'm good here now. Usually you'll be prompted for that. So if you're doing the same thing I'm doing, then you'll be prompted for a username and password. If you're just getting from Excel, it won't matter. And if you're getting it from Excel, you're about to be at the you'll get to the same screen that we're going to be in, like 2 screens, and then nothing about Postgres will be specific to that anymore. Transform data. So this is where it's going to get a little complicated. This is where things get a little complicated, but it sets us up down the road. So, like I said, we want 1 row for Arsenal and 1 row for Coventry. Or in this case now it's Aston Villa, however you say that. Disclaimer, I'm a baseball fan, I'm an NFL fan. I like soccer a little bit. Or football a little bit. I don't know it very well. So forgive me, I like it. I think this is interesting. I just don't know it very well. So, okay. So, what I'm thinking we need to do is essentially do what I was explaining earlier that we could do with SQL statements, but that we're not going to. And so what I think is we have this query, This is just the first query that comes up when we do that import statement that we did, or import navigation that we did. I'm going to duplicate this, so you can just duplicate it. So now we have two of the same feed coming in, one here and one here. I'm going to call this for now. Actually, I'm going to keep this that, and I'm going to call this. It might be a little bit more straightforward to do it this way. Let's rename this as home, and we'll rename this as away. The reason I say it's more straightforward, what I was going to do is keep one with the full name, and then merge in the away once we're done doing our changes, and just merge it into that one. That's why I didn't want to call it home, because it's not going to be home in the end. But actually, we'll do home and away, and then we'll merge the queries as a new query to make it a little simpler, a little bit more. It's not really simpler, but a little bit more straightforward. So first things first, I want to identify the columns that we want to keep for the home teams. So match ID, season, match week, date. We want this for everything. I don't see any need for time. I'm going to end up deleting that. It's going to be a step here. We can always come back later and get rid of that step. That's what's really nice about Power Query. It saves these steps. Then when you need to refresh data, you just click the refresh button, or you schedule a refresh, or whatever your process is for that. And these steps happen every time. And you can alter the steps, and then that'll apply to your process. And now your process will include whatever changes you made to the steps. It's really a nice tool. This is home. So we want all the home data. We want all the home data that we actually want to use, so we don't need to keep all of it. Full-time home team goals. Full-time result. I don't really need I don't think we need the halftime goals. Referee, I don't see much use for that. For this, home team shots on target. Those are both going to be very useful. We can see shooting percentages over time. Might be pretty interesting. Or I believe in soccer, shooting that percentage would be your shots compared to your shots on target compared to your shots. And then we could probably do a goal percentage too. But I think a shooting percentage is like your shots on target compared to just your shots in general. If it's not, then we can make that percentage if we think it's interesting. Home team corners, sure. Home team fouls. Home team yellow cards. Home team red cards, why not? We don't need this bet stuff. Home team points. And then I think we're taking result. I believe I saw a result in here somewhere. If we are taking result, and the point I was going to make is we don't actually need result, because we can use the points to figure that out. Whichever team got 3 won, whichever team got 0 lost. If they both got 1, it was a draw. That's how soccer works. Again, I apologize. I'm from America. I call it soccer. Just what I've always known it as. If you call it football, I understand. I just know it as soccer. I swear there was a result column in here, but maybe not. Maybe that was a different data set. Okay. Full-time result. Okay. Now we're going to go to, actually we're just going to right click those columns and then remove other columns. So that's what I did. And you might have thought, if you haven't done this before, why is he selecting those columns? He wants to keep them. Well, you can do that. But you can choose the columns you want to delete, or you can choose the columns you want to keep and then just remove other columns. And there we go. So now we have all our home team data. Now for away, we want to do the exact same thing. We need to do the exact same columns, we need to make sure we do the exact same columns, and we need to make sure that we name them the same thing, because we're going to have to take this home and away stuff isn't going to matter anymore. And it's important to make that distinction that we're not talking about home team result anymore. We are, because these are home teams, but we need them to be. We need for our purposes. This is just what the team scored in that row, and it doesn't really matter their home team. The home team will be signified by a column we're going to create, just called whatever name, probably something like home or away, and then it'll say home for all these teams. So first things first, I'm going to go to the away and just mimic the steps that we did, but for away. So it's going to choose the exact opposite ones, but the same conceptual columns. So now we're doing away team and full-time away team goals. Full-time result. Away team shots. Okay. I believe we selected all the right columns. We'll find out if we didn't. So I'm going to remove other columns now. So now we have the home versions and the away versions of all these columns. So the next thing I need to do is anywhere, the way that I'm just going to name these, I think the simplest way and the least error prone way will be to just take out home underscore from anything where we see that. And this is going to be a little, and like I said, I'm no expert. There's very likely a better way to do this. Maybe, a little bit more automated, but it's only like 9 columns. I can go in and just do this. It's one time, and then it's because these steps happen automatically every time. I need to do this one time, and that's it. It's not that big a deal. Sometimes you take more time figuring out how to automate a step that would have taken 45 seconds. Now, if we had to do this every time, that would become a pain, and we should automate it. In this instance, I'm not too concerned. All right. Now I'm going to do it for away. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I think we're good on that front. We'll just keep all the data there. It's fine. Okay, so let's merge these queries now. So, like I said before, the goal was to have 2 queries that are duplicates, one for the home teams, one for the away teams, and then essentially double these records. And then what we're going to end up having is, you'll see, for instance, where you're going to union these. So they're going to just be stacked one on top of the other, metaphorically. So we have 1993, 1994, Arsenal Coventry. As I showed you before in Excel, there was only one of those in our original data set. But in our away, we have that again. So now we're going to have 2 records for that match ID. And that's how we're going to identify one game. And like I had said, or like you saw, we had Arsenal home team, Coventry away team. Now we're going to have Arsenal team for this match ID, Coventry team for this match ID. And no way yet to determine which team was home and which team was away. But we know these are our home teams, and we know these are our away teams. So if I just add a column in each of these for home or away, and I can just do that like this. Let's just do custom column, I think is how we would do this. Let's call it home or away. And then I think, FYI, if I was wrong about this, my answer would have been to Google it. Google is your friend. These AI tools, so ChatGPT or Claude, or if you're at a company and they have their own, use that. Great tools as well. And you should be using these tools. Stack Overflow, I don't know Power BI is much on there, but for if you're doing like Python or something else for data statistics or data analysis, whatever, data science, Stack Overflow, Power BI, Microsoft, like the Microsoft forums, Reddit, all sorts of different sources for questions, answers that have already been asked for years. So you might not, you very rarely will have to ask something and wait for an answer unless you're using like an AI tool or something. But anyway, home or away, and we called it home here. Now here, let's do it again. Custom column, same name, home or away. Away. Quotes away. Now, if all went well, we should be able to merge these queries and have no problem. I said if all went well, because it doesn't always go all well. And then you troubleshoot and you figure it out and you move on. Let's see. Merge queries as new. This is what I was saying earlier. I think it's a little bit more straightforward to keep a home query and an away query and then merge them as new rather than have like one be an away query and then the home query be our master query. It's just a little bit more confusing if you need to come back to this in 2 months and remember what you were doing. Or maybe more importantly, if somebody else needs to look at what you're doing and have no idea. Because even in 2 months, you might remember. But if somebody else is looking, they might be, what on planet Earth was this guy doing? So merge queries as new. Match ID. I'm sorry. We want to append queries as new. Merge queries is a join. So if you know SQL, it's a join. And I more often use that for things, so I was just instinctively going there. We want to append queries. That's why when I saw keys, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. So append queries, my apologies. Append queries is new. This is like a union. 2 tables, so home and away. There we go. Call this match team results. Because each record is one match or one team per match. Now I'm going to close and apply, and we'll have data in Power BI. Did not mean to rhyme there. Okay. And actually, one more thing that I think is important. Again, this is along the lines of if somebody else needs to know what you were doing or needs to use what you were doing. We don't need away and home here. All that would do is confuse what we're doing. All that would do is potentially cause somebody to use those when our clear goal was to only be using match team results as our fact table. So I'm going to go back into transform data, which you click transform data to get back in here. And I'm going to do this option called enable, disable, or uncheck the option for enable load. So I'm going to disable load, meaning these are not going to load into a report. We don't need them. We just need, all we needed them for was to get to this. So now I close and apply. There we go. And we are coming in on an hour here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the video here. So this is going to be a multi-part series. It's going to I think this is a good stopping point because what we did in this episode was looked at a data set from scratch, evaluated it, decided, or really before even deciding anything, we looked at it, kind of got a feel for what's there. Are there keys? How many columns are there? How many rows are there? How is this data structured? What data do we need? What data do we not need? From there, we decided a general direction. We weren't quite at the technical direction. We weren't quite at like, what exactly do we want to do? Which columns do we want to delete? But we did know we wanted to delete some columns. We did know we wanted to have home and away separately rather than together on the same row. And we knew those kind of things. Then we started getting into the technical details and importing data into a database, importing data into Power BI, and using Power Query to format our transformation steps. This is a good stopping point for this episode. In the next episode, the plan is to get into Power BI report development, so making actual reports. I'm going to make a few different pages, and that's where we're going to decide what DAX measures do we need, what calculated columns do we need, how do we want to display the data, and what should we do to display it that way. So if you're watching this after these videos have been released, you'll just move on to the next video. If not, it'll be out shortly. And I appreciate you following along. I hope that this portion was very helpful for the initial phases of building a Power BI report. And I think the next phase will be just as helpful in actually building the report itself. Again, thank you very much, and I'll see you soon.